Kia ora and welcome to CIO Leadership Live. I'm your host, Kathy O'Sullivan, editor for CIO New Zealand. And my guest today is Alan Lightburn, Chief Digital Officer at Tauranga District Council. Hello, Alan.
Good morning, Kathy. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How's it going in the beautiful bay today?
Yeah, it's another sunny day down here, like it is every single day. We have got a little bit of humidity today, which we don't normally have, but otherwise perfect.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. So listen, can you tell us a bit more about your role and what your team at Tauranga District City Council does?
District City Council, yeah. So Tauranga City Council, although often confused. So we're the digital services team. We're probably a little bit odd compared to, a lot of other IT or digital teams that you might see in the corporate world. So we've got your classic IT stuff, service desk, infrastructure, BI, software development, all that kind of stuff. But alongside that, we also run the mailroom. Bit of a throwback there. We run the city scanning team. So those guys that you see out are guys and girls on the side of the road with the poles that are doing survey and scanning. We do all of that. We do all the geospatial work, street naming, and a lot of records, information management and Privacy Act work. So, yeah, a little bit more diverse than what your normal team might look like.
Yeah, that's certainly a wide range of stuff from the mailroom to your scanning teams. So can you tell us a bit more around your thoughts on transformation? So it's often, thrown around as word, something that's a given within an organization, but in reality, it's actually not an easy thing to do. So how has that taken shape in your own career?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? I think you jump back maybe 10 years and like all marketing buzzwords, transformation was the thing. And you roll forward today and, if you mention the T word, all of a sudden everybody gives you dirty looks. But I guess the underlying philosophy hasn't really changed. So I guess the way that I see it is, you've pretty much got two parts to your role. One part is just making sure the ship is running steady and everything's working well. And then the second part is really helping the wider organization understand what's possible rather than probable. And I think, especially in the council environment, that's a really big opportunity. We have 43 different businesses under our umbrella, running everything from an airport through to barking dogs. And so, the diversity of thought that the team can bring to the wider organisation to help them see what that possible might look like. What are we seeing internationally? What are we seeing out of corporate? What are the things that are happening out of the great organisations that are running down in the bay? And how do we bring some of that thinking to bear as we deliver change into the wider organisation and to the community?
So then walking back from that end point of transformation, do you think there is a starting point to kickstart a transformation journey? What are some of the key steps you think CIOs must take along the way?
Well, firstly, it's all about understanding. So, you've got to understand what the organization's end goal is. You've got to understand what the individual motivations are of your divisions or business units or whatever you might have, and try and figure out what your and your team's part to play in that is. And I think that can be quite different depending on the organization. So, in one organization, you might have quite a lead role and sort of driving and pushing that ahead. And in other organizations, it's really about sitting in the background and helping those teams be successful, even if you're not the one necessarily out the front waving the flag. And I think certainly in our organization, as I said, with 43 different businesses, it's quite different, right? So in some areas, we're probably the ones out a little bit waving the flag. And in other areas, actually, it's much better for us to sort of sit back in the background and just help those teams achieve. But unless you have that understanding about what is driving these different businesses and different business units, I think, you start in a really weak place.
And 43 businesses as part of that, that's huge. So do you think there are any common roadblocks to avoid along the way when you are undergoing that transformation journey?
Yeah, well, how long have you got? I mean, the most obvious one is business change and readiness. And that's probably as much about having the support and resources for the teams to be successful as it is just, are they actually ready in their own minds? There's one initiative we were running last year where there was a real drive to get it up and running. Let's get this thing running, let's get it delivered. And I would say there was probably a little bit of conflict between my team and this other business unit, because we were sort of, they felt we were trying to hold them back. And the reality was they hadn't done anything like this before. And so what they thought needed to happen was we just get going, right? We'll get in there, we'll deliver some stuff and we'll learn. And I guess our experience was telling us, well, no, let's spend a little bit of time understanding what the end game is here. What's your real vision for where this is going to end up? How do you want your people to feel? And it was nice to sort of see over the space of sort of 4 or 5 weeks that sort of dynamic really, really changed from, why are you holding us back, to, oh, we get it now. We see how big this was. We didn't actually appreciate how big it was before. So, that's a pretty critical one. I think the other one is a lack of investing in people's time, and whether that's bringing SMEs into the team, whether that's backfilling people so they've got enough capability. Lots of organisations are running at 110, 120%. So simply layering another project over the top of it is just asking for trouble. So I really think that, having that backfill there is really, really important, and giving people the time to sort of get out of their day job, understand what these initiatives are, is critically important. And probably the last one, I think, in terms of roadblock is, do you actually have the buy-in? I often, maybe not as much nowadays, but certainly back in the day, there was a lot of these kind of IT projects. And I think we've probably got away from a lot of that today, but at times there can still be projects that are a bit, either they're top down or they're one person's great idea, and you haven't actually got that buy-in. And so you've got this sort of passive resistance sitting in the team. So really uncovering that and understanding what's driving those people and what they need and what they want is pretty critical, I think.
So you've kind of touched on this. So then do you think transformation, should it just be viewed as a project, or is it an ongoing thing? Is there ever a deadline or an end date to transformation?
Well, I've yet to come across a business where everybody sort of gets to the end of whatever it might be, project or whatever, it goes, oh, that's good, we're good now, we can kind of stop. So I think change is constant. The scale of that change is probably the thing that ebbs and flows. So, you may go through a period of really having to lift your maturity or, change your customer experience. And so you might go through quite a chunky period of 2 or 3 years, and then things might drop back a bit. Although, again, I'd say in our organisation, there's certainly never any shortage of demand for change. And I don't see anything that's going to make that stop in the next sort of 5 to 10 years.
So then, as Chief Digital Officer, how are you influencing the leadership team at Tauranga City Council?
It's probably a combination of crazy ideas, which people often look at me and go, where'd you get that from? That's madness. And I think just building relationships, right? So, getting out, having those coffees. I try to arrange a couple of catch-ups with senior leaders every week. Again, it's a pretty large organisation, so there's a bunch of people to get around, build the relationship, sit down, have the chat, find out what's on people's minds, because sometimes the stuff that's coming top down, or even the things that are bubbling up out of the organisation, may not represent some great ideas that people have got. So giving them the opportunity to kind of chew the fat on that sort of stuff is important. And then as I said, I call them crazy ideas, but there's a bunch of stuff happening globally, at times starting to have those conversations about some stuff that might be perhaps seen as being on the bleeding edge, or how does that apply to New Zealand, or how does that apply to a council? Starting to lay the seeds for those different ideas, and figure out where is there opportunities for traction, or which ones just don't make sense. Digital twins is quite big in government at the moment. We don't really talk about digital twin, right? We talk about visual storytelling. So it's interesting that actually starting to figure out, digital twin, okay, people have an allergic reaction to that. They don't know what that is. But actually, if you talk about visual storytelling, people kind of get that. That's really important. That's part of what we do with the community. And so, that's an example of something that was probably a little bit of a crazy idea when it was digital twin, but when we started talking about visual storytelling, I can see how that can play. Let's demo some stuff, do some proof of concepts, show some people, and all of a sudden it gets a bunch of traction.
It's so important, isn't it? That key role that a CDO or a CIO has in explaining those concepts and how they can work for a business. So can you tell us then, it is an ever evolving role, CIO, CDO, CTO. What do you think are some of the key attributes of a modern day CIO in relation to leadership?
Yes, it's an interesting question, because I think maybe at an enterprise leadership type level, I think especially, God forbid, post-COVID, there's a real opportunity to help other leaders understand how a leadership style and approach and technology can come together to make their life easier, especially those that may have been more comfortable sitting, kind of at the end of the pod with their team, looking over them, and all of a sudden that safety blanket's been pulled away. So sort of being able to walk the talk on, what can a great team environment and culture look like when we're working in this hybrid or remote environment. I think that's one of the really key elements at the moment. And then I think the second piece, as I was talking about before, is just helping people see what that possible looks like. And being able to do it in a safe environment. Nobody wants whatever the title is, CIO or CDO, that's sort of coming in, trying to be the smartest person in the room, telling people how their business could be better, right? They want somebody that's going to catch up with them for a coffee or a beer and have a chat about how am I going to help you solve your problems? What's some great ideas that might be able to move you and your team to the next level? So really think the style has significantly changed in the last 10, 20 years in terms of what that role is like. Probably you think back 10 or 15 years, and this is probably true for some CIOs still, very much seen as a service provider. Somebody will tell you to jump, you ask how high. If that's the way you're operating, then you need to find a way to get out of that mode and be that, that trusted ally, the person that other leaders want alongside them to help them be successful.
And you've touched on this in your previous answer, but how are you then creating that internal culture in your team and helping them thrive?
Yes, good question. I mean, it seems to work. I don't really know what the silver bullet is. We try and have a lot of fun. We ensure that, I guess, connection is purposeful. We know that it's not just going to happen if we just leave it to chance. So that we know that we need to have, rituals and time set aside so that our people are catching up, our team leaders are catching up, we're getting one-on-ones done, we're getting all hands meetings done. And I guess trying to create the time for us to talk about people. So, for example, we have all of my people leaders get together on a Friday morning, and we don't talk about work per se. So we're not talking about task or strategy or where we're going. The only thing we talk about is people. So how's the week been for the leaders? How's it going for the teams? What support do they need? What things aren't working? But again, it's all focused on people rather than on task. And we try and bring that into all of our meetings. And then certainly in this COVID world, where we haven't necessarily been able to get in the office, trying to come up with ways of, how do we have that fun, right? So be it the virtual Winter Olympics, going and having a barbecue down at a park. We have Friday move day, so every lunchtime on a Friday, people, if they want to, can go down the mountain. Some people might choose to run it. Some people might walk up it. Some people might go for a swim. But what's different ways to connect that work for different people? Because not everybody's going to want to go for a run on a Friday, right?
And who won the Winter Olympics?
It was pretty close, but one of our GIS team won the Winter Olympics, who went above and beyond, and his 5 minutes acceptance speech probably talked to how much effort he put into the win.
I love it. I love it. So also just on reflecting on team culture and staff, why do you think we don't have enough diversity in IT roles here in New Zealand? And what do you think are some practical things that can be done to better reflect the country that we live in?
Yeah, it's hard. I think when you look at the what's going on in the schools. So, I've been lucky enough to spend a fair amount of time in the different schools around the Bay, more the secondary schools. What you're seeing in the sciences is probably a little bit of a flow-on effect, and it's certainly getting better and better every single year. So I think that's a really positive step. But that's probably more at the gender level. I think when you sort of step back and look at more at, certainly down in the Bay, how many kids from different ethnic backgrounds are getting in, then when you start talking to the parents, I think for some parents there's a real fear. They haven't been involved in it. They don't know what it is. And therefore they're kind of pushing their kids away from these types of roles, potentially into more blue collar. So it's been nice when we've been able to go along to some of those parent evenings and trying to talk to people, what is this IT thing, to try and demystify it and try and remove some of that risk thinking. That said, we're pretty lucky in the Bay in that it is a place that people want to come. So maybe the last 3 or 4 months being the exception, but certainly before that, we probably had our pick of candidates, and that's allowed our team to be very diverse, certainly the most diverse team that I've ever had the pleasure of leading. So, that's nice, but we definitely need to continue to push in the education sector, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. So then can you tell us what's maybe a mistake that you made in your career that's shaped you as a leader?
Oh boy, there's been so many. I think probably one of the ones that, it's probably a couple, but, one of the ones that probably shaped me the most, I was working in an organisation, relatively senior role on a steering committee. So there's 3 senior leaders on the steering committee, and really weren't that comfortable with the way the project was going. But the project owner, who was one of my peers, just sort of kept on going, no, we've got this. Trust me. I know this project manager. He's going to get there. We've just got to give him time. And I sort of felt uncomfortable, but at the same time, I had a great relationship with my peer, always trusted him. So I just kind of let it happen. And then you sort of had the little wobbly moment where all of a sudden the project really does go red. And I remember the CFO kind of pulling me into his office and going, what are you doing? And I sort of played back what had sort of happened, and I really didn't want to throw anybody under the bus, but I sort of trusted my peer. I didn't really have any reason not to trust him, and he just sort of said, I think you've forgotten what your job is here. Your job is not to be this person's friend. Your job is to protect the organisation and the shareholders. And I think that was really interesting for me, because it did make me reflect a lot more on, when do you need to say enough is enough? When do you go from colleague or peer to sort of needing to step in? And I think, that was a real tangible example of where I'd probably just let things go on too long and hadn't had that hard conversation because I really trusted this person. And so since then, I probably take more of a critical look at myself and be really clear about why I'm, and this probably is quite pervasive in a lot of the things I do now. Why am I actually in this meeting? What's my purpose here? What do I need to do? I'd almost score at myself when I get out of the back of it and go, well, did I do the job that I really set out to do or was asked by the organisation to do? And whether that's, coaching somebody or providing governance or, facilitating a workshop.
So then what's the best career advice you've ever received?
Oh, probably the best career advice I ever received was from somebody that told me not to read the words on a PowerPoint, because that's career limiting. That was probably the best. Look, you know, everybody's different, right? So, you know, introvert, extrovert, you know, A-type personality, you know, whatever. So, you know, the rules are going to be different for everybody. I think the main thing is just being yourself and being genuine. Like, most people can see through somebody that isn't being themselves. Doesn't mean that you don't need to adapt your style to suit others' needs, but, you know, there's a real fine line between being adaptable and not being true to yourself.
So then what would you say to someone who was aspiring to be a CIO or Chief Digital Officer? What advice would you give them?
Be sure that that's actually what you want to do. You know, it's probably not as easy job as what a lot of people might think it is. You know, probably part kindergarten teacher, part boxing club trainer. You know, it's usually you're caught in the middle of everything, right? So yeah, be clear that that's a role that you're really, really up for. No, I think diversity is probably the key, and I think that applies to everything, right? And whether that's diversity of thought in terms of the people that you're working around, or diversity of role, what you tend to find is, I think most of the more senior and probably well-rounded CIOs, CDOs don't have a direct line there in that IT line. You know, they haven't started as a software developer and kind of moved through to be CIO. They've sort of been bounced in and out of IT and business roles. And so I think, you know, when you're at that point where CIO is next, you really want to have a really, really strong business basis, not a technical basis. So to me, finding those opportunities to step out of the technical roles and get into more delivery roles in the wider organization, and whether that's a secondment, whether that's project work, you know, anything that can help you get that more well-rounded view of the world, so that when you're in these more senior roles, you're not looking at the world from an IT point of view, right? That's not the job. The job is to look at it from an organizational view, from a strategic view, and then bring a bit of an IT technology lens to how could this maybe help solve this business problem.
Great advice. Great advice. Thank you, Alan. So can you tell us finally what's important to you in the months ahead?
Yeah, I think for us, as for many, it will be recruitment. You know, we're on a little bit of a growth trajectory anyway. I think everybody knows the market is very, very hard at the moment. You know, we've certainly gone from seeing 100, 110 applicants down to, you know, 3 to 10 applicants. So that makes life a lot harder, just going back to market multiple times to find, you know, that right cultural fit to bring into the team. So that's going to be a lot of hard yards for us. And then I guess, you know, we're on a journey of, you know, what we call our ecosystem implementation. So basically rolling out the Microsoft suite and the SAP suite across the organisation, and doing so in kind of a shared relationship with Auckland Council and Christchurch City Council, who also run SAP. So really kind of continuing that journey and continuing to tighten up those relationships with those other organisations, because, you know, unlike a corporate, you know, there shouldn't be anything that we want to hide from a council point of view. So, you know, anything that Auckland can do that we can borrow, anything that we can do that Christchurch could borrow, or whatever it might be, is pretty important. So that's really our focus, is just making the best outcome for the councils that we can. And, you know, in light of a bunch of regulatory reform, that's probably more important now than it ever has been.
Definitely, and keeping those ratepayers happy.
Yes.
Alan Lightbourne, Chief Digital Officer at Tauranga City Council, thank you so much for your time today.